And welcome back to the ShadowBear Story Sessions, the podcast about brutally dark, insane, and hilarious old folktales and fairy tales. We're going through the original versions of Grimm's fairy tales. Today's tale titled The Gnome. Feels like a reboot. Anytime they reboot like an old property or fairy tale or something, they really simplify it and try to make it sound all like intense. Like the note keeper, I don't know, the gnome, the bludgeon. It's like a hitman called the Bludgeon. Anyway, this is the gnome, and we're getting right into it. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, I got lights. Is that doing anything for you? Is that better? Who knows? We begin. Once upon a time, there was a rich king who had 3 daughters. Every day, they went walking in the palace garden, where the king, who loved trees, had planted many different kinds, but he was most fond of one particular tree, which he protected by placing it under a spell. Whoever picked one of its apples would be sent 100 fathoms underground. All right, I'm just going to say this. I love how this is starting. We've got a tree-obsessed king who has... Oh, why is that protecting it? You got to pick the apples on an apple tree, right? Just because someone's picking an apple doesn't mean they're attacking the tree. In fact, just the opposite. It's doing nothing. There's no magic that prevents anyone from just chopping it down here. Only people who try to do what its purpose is, try to engage with it on its terms. Isn't it bad for trees if you don't, pick the fruit, or if the fruit, I guess the fruit falls off naturally, but I feel like I remember hearing if, you don't pick fruit from, I don't know if it was apples or lemons or what, that it actually is bad for it wants to give you its apples. Fulfill its purpose, king. Don't punish people who mean to enjoy it. Man. If anything, this is just making this tree a horrible obstacle and death trap, essentially, necessitating it being destroyed. No one cares about your apple tree, bro. Chill. No one cared about it before, but now that it has the potential to send people 100 fathoms underground, we have to get rid of this tree, buddy. Also, this isn't a garden, this is just a forest, right? Guy who's obsessed with trees, a whole collection of trees, that's a forest. Anyway, we continue. When harvest time came, the most dangerous time of year, the apples on that tree became as red as blood. Every day the 3 daughters looked under the tree to see if the wind had blown an apple to the ground, but they never found one. So now these people are just having to just hope that an apple falls down. Also, there's got to be other apples, right? There's no reason why this apples are particularly delicious. Go get apples from a safer tree, girls. Gradually, the tree became so full and its branches so heavy that it seemed the tree would collapse. What's wrong with it? There's something wrong with it. This is a side effect of this spell or something. Now the apples literally can't fall. This is just awful. This is a disaster waiting to happen. By then, the youngest sister, it's always the youngest one who gets into stuff in these folk tales. I don't know why, but it's always the youngest one who is the most beautiful and the favorite of the king. Let's see if they do that here. If they say it's oh, he's your favorite. They're really upfront about it too. The king is always like, you're my favorite daughter. It's keep that to yourself, king. By then, the youngest sister had such a craving for an apple from this tree that she said to her sisters, our father loves us far too much to put a curse on us. I believe he cast a spell mainly with strangers in mind. Oh, this is bad news. Upon saying that, she plucked a nice plump apple, ran to her sisters and said, just taste it, dear sisters. I've never tasted anything so delicious in all my life. But wouldn't they be able to see if she had taken a bite? Maybe She's like, oh, I ate a different apple. Try this one. Also, what a dick move. This is horrible. Then the two other princesses also took a bite of the apple, and suddenly all three sank deep down into the earth, leaving no trace whatsoever behind them. So it didn't actually specify that the youngest daughter had taken a bite, but apparently she had already. And yeah, they all just were pulled down into the earth. Again, this is a horrible plan. What the it's a castle garden. Like the only people that are there are presumably either servants or your daughters or guests. All people that you would not want to be thrust deep, deep underground to presumably die. I don't know how you survive that. Or, I mean, I guess maybe you could climb out if it's like a hole. It says they sank. That implies them just being like swallowed up by the earth, which is definitely death. This is a horrible idea and does not in any way accomplish his goal of protecting the tree. That fence, build a fence, king. People have been thriving from fence technology for centuries. Jesus, buddy. At noon, the king wanted to call them to the dining table, but they were nowhere to be found. He looked all around the castle and garden, but couldn't find them. Finally, he became so distressed that he made it known throughout the country that whoever brought his daughters back could have one of them for his wife. Oh my, this... Oh. These folktale dads, whether or not they are kings, are the stupidest people in the world. Guys, you created this situation, and now you're just gonna send one of your daughters, I guess whoever they pick, that's unclear, to be the wife of whoever happens to find them. Prisoner. Making one of your daughters a prisoner, essentially, who has no autonomy over her own choices. Well, as a result, more men than you can imagine, that's literally what it says here, went out searching for them all over the kingdom. For the princesses were known to be beautiful and kind to all. Indeed, they were loved by everyone in the country. Well, that mischievous... Actually, not even mischievous. I was going to say that mischievous youngest daughter has like a, she's plucky and like a go-getter and, has kind of a cool vibe, I guess. Sort of what got him into this, but... Yeah, but I mean... I don't know if I'd say she's kind to all, because she also like sort of forced the apple on her sisters when they weren't going to do it. It was her who led that charge. Also very devious of the tree to like, it didn't happen immediately. They didn't get pulled underground immediately. It was like, let's wait, see if anyone else takes a bite of this apple, and then boom, 3 for 1. One apple gets plucked, 3 princesses in the ground. Man. Well, they're beloved. Among the searchers were 3 huntsmen who had spent a week looking for them and had eventually come to a large castle. When they went inside, they found beautiful rooms, and in one of the rooms, the table was set with delicious dishes that were still steaming hot, but there was not a living soul to be seen or heard in the whole castle. At last, they were so hungry that they sat down and ate up all the food. Then they agreed to stay in the castle and drew lots. What? So they're just going to be like, we live here now? There was food out. Either someone was there and like the family then had to leave suddenly, like they got bad news or something, or there was like a gas leak. I don't know. I don't know what's driving these people out. Or dark magic. There's no situation in which you can just live in this castle. Those are the only 2 options I can think of. Or there were people were there and they were murdered. Option number 3, also not good and not an invitation to live there yourself. No matter what is the explanation for why this castle is here with a whole dinner table full of food on it, no matter what the explanation for this is, There's no situation in which you can just live there now. All right, let's see what these idiots ultimately have as their fate. They agreed to stay at the castle, and drew lots to see which one would remain there, while the other two continued to look for the princesses. Why does anyone have to stay there? Just all three keep looking, right? Doesn't that make sense? Why would anyone stay there? To guard whoever actually lives there from coming back? To like barricade the doors or something? Jesus. The lot fell to the oldest, and the next day he stayed in the castle while the two youngest went out searching. At noon, a tiny gnome came and asked for a piece of bread. All right, here we go, guys. The huntsman took a loaf of bread that he found there and cut off a slice. As he was, well, at least he's nice about it. Like, this isn't my bread. I can give it to whoever. As he was handing it to the little man, the gnome let it drop and asked him to kindly pick up the piece for him. That's a trap. He's a gnome. He's closer to the ground than you are. Don't be picking this up. It's a gnome trick, obviously. As the huntsman was bending over, the gnome took a stick, grabbed him by his hair, and gave him a good beating. What? So it's the gnome's house, right? It's got to be the gnome's house. This gnome knocked on the door, expecting to come home to a plate or like a dinner table full of food that he left out. Because it's, it's his house. He can do what he wants. He can leave food out if you want to leave food out. He finds this random guy opening the door. He's like, oh, hey, could I have some of that food? It's a weird trick to then do the like drop it. It's like, oh, could you pick that up for me? And then just beat him with a stick. Just beat him with a stick. It's preventing you. I mean, maybe he's sort of got the drop on him this way. All right. I'm impressed, actually. Regardless, I'm impressed by this gnome here. It's got to be his castle, right? The next day, the second huntsman stayed home, and he fared no better. When the other two returned in the evening, the oldest asked him, well, how did things go? Very badly. Yeah. Getting your ass kicked by a gnome is definitely a bad day, I would say. Jesus. All right, so the two eldest brothers confided in each other about their plight and didn't tell the youngest anything about it because they didn't like him. What the hell? They always called him Stupid Hans because he was not particularly worldly wise. All right, I'm here for this. I'm totally up for the introduction of a character named Stupid Hans, although it's kind of it's totally a dick move by the brothers. Also, if he's stupid, you can't be that mad at a stupid guy, right? He don't know no better. He's stupid. He says they don't like him. Come on. He's your brother. Be a bro. So I guess the first one, it says they confided each other about their plight afterwards. So I guess the first one didn't tell the second one. It's like, oh, hey, look out for this gnome who's going to like show up and kick your ass. But this also means that after the gnome beat up the first guy, he just like left. He like ran away. I guess it's not his castle, or he's just like, let's see if they stay and I can do this again tomorrow. But also, like, yeah, he should have told the second brother, hey, look out for this gnome, so that it couldn't pull the same bread dropping trick, or just like, hey, if you see a gnome, close the door because he's gonna try to beat you up. Now, there's obvious, very easy ways to guard against this, right? We have no indication of magic being used thus far from this gnome. He's just a gnome that, like, got you to bend over to pick something up and then grabbed your hair and beat you with a stick. Gnomes are little. These are huntsmen. They're hunters. Presumably they're physically fit. You should be able to protect yourself here if you're warned. But I'm guessing they're not going to warn. Stupid Hans. It's not a clever nickname, by the way. If you think you're so smart, you can do better than Stupid Hans. We continue. On the third day, the youngest stayed home, and again the gnome came to fetch a piece of bread. Whose castle? All right, whose castle is this? Whose castle is this? And who's this gnome? What's going on here? Is this castle just like a trap that this gnome lays to get people to try to stay there so he can show up and beat people up? Is this just like is this the sort of like treat underneath the box that you know what I'm talking about when there's like someone puts a treat under a box with a stick holding the box up and then a little animal goes inside to eat the thing and they pull the stick and then the box falls down and traps them. Is this just like a little piece of bait? The castle is just bait to get people to stay in there, and then the gnome just shows up whenever he wants and beats up whoever's inside. In which case, weird life, but okay, you do you, gnome. Also, after day 2 of like getting beat up, leave this castle. Aren't you guys doing fine? Go look for the princesses. This is not. Or just live in the castle and like really barricade this castle, right? No one's preventing you from being in the castle. This gnome is just coming to kick your ass. But you can ward against that. You can, all 3 of you, just be like, all right, well, we didn't get the princesses, but we have a castle now. So let's just focus on that. All right. So, third day, we got stupid Hans. Gnome's coming to fetch a piece of bread. When the huntsman handed him a piece, the gnome let it drop again and asked him to kindly pick it up for him. What? Cried the huntsman. Can't you pick the bread up yourself? If you won't make the effort to take better care of your daily bread, then you really don't deserve to eat it. Huh. You know what? Fair point. Like, interesting. I know this is not a tactic, and he's just like saying this. He's like, what? If you care so little about bread, then like you don't really like if you won't even pick up your own bread, I'm not gonna pick it up for you. Fair point. Also, yeah, I mean, clearly there's more going on with this gnome, but if someone just like asked you for food and you handed it to them and then they dropped it and then they're like, pick it up and give it to me again, be like, I just gave you food. I just gave you my food. Why, what is this act of humiliation, dropping it and making me pick it up again? Fair point. Well played, stupid Hans. Not so stupid after all. Then the gnome got very angry and ordered him to do it, but the young huntsman acted swiftly. He grabbed the gnome and thrashed him soundly. All right, that's... Again, like, we know that this gnome has been kicking his brother's asses all week, but in a vacuum, if he didn't know this was happening, that's a pretty violent reaction to the gnome getting angry. But also, yeah, what the hell, gnome? Why you don't order me to pick up this bread? Now it's super rude. Now it's obviously humiliating and mean. To be like, no, pick up my bread. Even though it's not even his bread. He was given that bread. Even though it's not really the huntsman's bread either. This is very confusing. There's a lot going on here. And a lot of questions hanging in the air about ownership and background. Like, who's entitled to what? There's like a manners question and like etiquette involving like giving someone something and what do you owe. I don't. There's a lot swirling in the ether right now, but this stupid Hans just turned the tables on this gnome. The gnome shrieked loudly and said, "Stop, stop, let me go, and I'll tell you where the king's daughters are." What? He's involved in that? How is he involved in that? Is he the one who put the curse on them? Or on the tree? Did the king employ this gnome to curse the tree? And if so, wouldn't the gnome then tell the king? Because he knows that. He knows that the daughters are there. This is a good point. If this is a cursed tree, well, it is a cursed tree. The fact when you curse a tree like this, clearly this means they're alive. They go to some sort of like underground prison whenever someone eats or picks an apple from this tree. there's a way to get back, clearly. They don't just die. The assumption is that they just die. And honestly, it feels like in reality that's probably what would happen. But clearly they're going to some weird underground purgatory state. They've been there for I think a week and 2 days now. Yeah, a whole week. They spent a week looking for them and eventually came to a large castle. So by this point, these princesses, these daughters, have been underground. I don't know if they're in like a cavern underground or if they're just like immobile, surrounded by soil. But they've been there for a week and a half. They're for sure dead. There's no way, unless, again, they're just in some sort of stasis, Sleeping Beauty style. But regardless, the gnome knows about it. Even if he's the only person who knows about it, he should tell the king. The only way I can presume he does know about it is if he was involved in the curse to begin with, in which case, yeah, he worked for the king, he set this up. It's like, you hire a plumber to install something and then like a septic tank, and then someone gets pulled out in the septic tank. You're like, hey, I need my wedding ring or whatever. The plumber comes out and gets it, right? Or I don't know. I've never had a septic tank, but that seems right? So the gnome should tell the king. There's so much. Let's figure out what happens. All right. When he heard that, he stopped thrashing him. The gnome told the huntsman that he came from beneath the earth, where there were more than a dozen other gnomes like him, and if the huntsman would go with him, he would show him where the king's daughters are. So there's like an underground world. So it's not just sending these people, whoever eats the apple, into the earth, like to die, or just sending them down. It's like transporting them to gnome world. That's different. That is a different punishment, and potentially not even a punishment at all, depending on how cool Gnome World is. I don't know about Gnome World. Maybe Gnome World is dope as hell. I want to go to Gnome World. Huntsman's going to go to Gnome World. Let's see what's the deal with Gnome World. Then the gnome pointed to the deep well without any water in it and told him to beware of his companions, for they were not to be trusted, and that he would have to save the king's daughters by himself. What? How's he? He says the brothers are not to be trusted? I mean, I guess not, but they didn't even tell each other about the gnome beating their ass. Also, how is the gnome to be trusted? He's been showing up every day trying to beat up whoever happens to open the door. Why would you trust him? No one here is trustworthy so far, even stupid Hans, which I love is his name. By the way, I love this dude's name is Stupid Hans. It's so on the nose and unimaginative and beautiful in its simplicity. But yeah, why would you trust the gnome, too? It's like, you just were super, super mean to me, and I beat you up, and this feels like a way for you to just, like, stop me from beating you up and get one over on me for real. Like, I got the best of you this time, but you want me to jump into that well right there? Okay, buddy. In the real world, that would be a trap. That would for sure be a trap. That would be the gnome being like, well, I couldn't get you that time, but here, there's a princess. I know where the daughters are. Everyone's talking about them. They're in that well. Jump on in, buddy. For sure a trap, even though I'm sure that's not going to be the case here. To be sure, his brothers wanted to rescue the king's daughters too, but they didn't want to exert themselves or take any risks. Aren't they hunters? Come on, guys. So they're cowards and everyone sucks in this. No one's good. I don't like anyone in this so far. Even the daughters, really. They haven't done anything wrong, to be honest. It's just really stupid and not cool of their dad to do that to that tree. Again, self-inflicted problem here. The best way would be to take a large basket, get into it with his hunting knife and a bell, and then have himself lowered down into the well. There, he would find 3 rooms, and in each one he would see a princess picking the lice from a many-headed dragon. What? In each room, he would have to cut the dragon's heads off. Whoa, there's a lot going on here, guys. So no, this is way more complicated than just anyone who plucks an apple from the tree gets sent underground. Which again seems like just a death sentence. No, they're going into this weird gnome world where they have to pick lice off of dragons' heads. What the hell is this? And what's the point of the bell? So is the gnome just like telling him what to do? I hate that in these. I really don't like in stories where the protagonist is passive and stupid and just gets told, "Hey, go do this." And then they do it and things work out and they don't exert themselves either. If he succeeds in any way just following by the gnome's orders, then he also is not exerting himself in a similar way to it, the way this story is like calling out his brothers for them not wanting to exert themselves. He ain't doing anything either. All right, well, these daughters are down there picking lice in different rooms. Ugh. I don't know how I feel about this. We continue. After the gnome had told him all that, he disappeared. And toward evening, the other two huntsmen returned and asked him how his day went. Who is this gnome and what is his deal? Why is he even there? So far, so good, he said. And he told them that he hadn't seen anyone until noon when a tiny gnome had come and asked for a piece of bread. After he handed it to him, the gnome had dropped it and asked him to pick it up. When he refused, the dwarf began to spit at him. They had a quarrel, and he gave the gnome a beating. Afterward, the little fellow told him where the king's daughters were. So he's just telling them. The gnome was like, "Hey, don't tell your brothers." And he's like, "Whatever, I'm going to tell my brothers. I'm stupid Hans." Upon hearing that, the two brothers became so livid that they turned green with envy. The next morning, why? But that's just stupid. Like, you didn't get tricked. Oh, I hate you. Like, oh, wow, great fortune for us three, right? Now we can all, The next morning, they went to the well together and drew lots to see who would be the first to get into the basket. The lot fell to the eldest again, and he had to get into the basket and take the bell with him. "If I ring," he said, "you must pull me up quickly." Ah, so that's what the bell is for. When he was just a little way down, he rang the bell, and they pulled him up again. Then the second brother got in and did the very same thing. Finally, it was why are they ringing the bell? What the hell, guy? Are they just, like, afraid? I mean, it says they don't want to exert themselves, but, like, come on. He goes, like, a little ways down. They don't even get to the bottom of the well. They don't even get to any of the dragon rooms. They're just, like, a few feet into the well, and he's like, "Okay, pull me up now." And then the next one has to go. That's not like a turn. It says they drew lots to see who had to go in first. This doesn't count. Just going in the basket and then immediately getting pulled back up after a few feet. That doesn't count. Be like, no, we drew lots to see who had to go first. You didn't go. You just took a little basket ride for like 10 seconds. That doesn't count, man. This is ridiculous. All right. Finally, it was the youngest brother's turn, and he let himself be lowered all the way to the bottom. After he got out of the basket, he took his hunting knife, went to the first door, and listened. He's gonna have to kill these dragons with a hunting knife? Guys, these dragons, you need give them like a sword or something. Come on. They're hunters too, or a gun. They gotta have more than just a hunting, not bow and arrow, anything. Guys, come on. All right, he was at the door listening. When he heard the dragon snoring loudly, he opened the door slowly and saw one of the king's daughters picking lice from the 9 dragons' heads in her lap. So he cut So he took his hunting knife and cut off all 9 heads. Well, that was easy. Jeez. Are you kidding me? It was just a sleep, and he just cut off every head one by one. After one head, it's gonna wake up, right? It was. That is infuriating. That is ridiculous. In every folktale or fairy tale, killing a dragon is like the greatest feat of strength and dexterity and being a true warrior and your heart is pure. No, it was asleep. It was just asleep, so I just cut all the heads off. That's this man. That's what he did. That is so stupid. All right. Well, we continue. The princess jumped up, threw her arms around him, and kissed him many times. All right, score for you, bro. Then she took her necklace of pure gold and hung it around his neck. After that, he went to the second princess. Just take her up first, right? Send her up in the basket and then like have them put the basket back down. Be like, yeah, because you don't know if you get killed by the second dragon, you want at least to save one of the princesses. Jeez. Fine. Yes. After that, he went to the second princess, who was picking lice from a 7-headed dragon, and he rescued her as well. Finally, he went to the. So again, it was just asleep. Like it was just asleep again. That's what this is. He's just. Why even have the dragons in the story at this point? Guys, the dragons aren't doing anything. They might as well just be in rooms. The dragons are like. Honestly, I feel bad for the dragons at this point. Like, you could have just left with the princesses. Right? You could have just been like, all right, let's go. They're asleep. Instead of having to murder these dragons. I'm on Team Dragon at this point. The dragons have done nothing wrong. If they like woke up and tried to kill him, then all right, that's self-defense. These dragons are just sleeping. And there's nothing to indicate that they're holding the princesses prisoner. Princesses are just picking lice out of their hair. Who told them to do that? I don't know. We don't know how this happened. Why are they doing that? Maybe they're trying to help the dragons. I mean, it's, implied by the fact that she woke up and kissed him a bunch, that she was happy about that. But again, it's very unclear why any of this is happening. Why the princesses are doing this, why the dragons are there, why the dragons don't wake up when one of their heads get cut off. Like if someone cuts off my finger and I'm asleep, I'm gonna wake up. All right? That's what's happening. Oh man, this is infuriating. Finally, he went to the youngest, who had a 4-headed dragon to louse, and he set her free too. Now they were all enormously happy and couldn't stop hugging and kissing him. So not one of the dragons put up a fight of any kind. They were all just asleep. This is ridiculous. He's not earning this at all. Not earning it. This is, all right. Now, yeah, all right. And now they're just like all like making out down there, I guess. Weird. Super weird story. Super weird. Soon thereafter, he rang the bell very loudly so his brothers who were above could hear. One after the other, he put the princesses into the basket and had them pulled up. Uh-oh. When his turn came, he remembered the gnome saying that his brothers were not to be trusted. So he took a big stone that was lying there and put it into the basket. He ain't so stupid after all, guys. When the basket was about midway up, the wicked brothers cut the rope so that the basket with a stone inside fell to the ground. Man. Why? Why would they do that? It says green with envy, but like, there's 3 princesses. There's 3 daughters. There's 1 each. What's going on? Also, they're for sure not gonna wanna like get with you guys when they saw you murder the guy who like they were clearly into. Maybe although if they all got up there, it was like, oh man, we were all just making out with your brother down there. It was super great. That would probably piss him off pretty good. That would piss him off. It would make him pretty mad. I'll bet. The envy would really ratchet up at that point, and they might not even be thinking clearly. But again, not justified in any sense. Still super not cool thing to do. Try to murder your brother. But yeah, it's also ruining their chances of getting with these girls. So just again, questionable motivations all around. All right, let's see what this guy does, because the rope is cut. So how is he going to get up at all? Since they thought that he was now dead, they ran off with the king's 3 daughters and made them promise to tell their father that they were the ones who had rescued them. Which they don't have to do. Why would they have? They don't have to follow that. Just be like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll tell him, and just be like, hey, they murdered the guy that actually rescued us. There is no reason why they have to honor that. Afterward, the 2 of them went to the king and asked to marry his daughters. I mean, there's 2 and there's 3. This doesn't line up anymore. So I guess you just pick. In the meantime, the youngest huntsman had become depressed. Fair. And just walked around the 3 rooms, for he thought he was doomed to die. What else is down there? Is this just the rooms? It's just the rooms. So that means that this magic fruit tree just sends people to these rooms with these sleepy dragons? These like comatose dragons? What is the point in any of that? That is crazy. All right, well, he's just wandering around these rooms with these dragon corpses, depressed, with a whole bunch of heads. 7, there's 9, 7, and 4, I think. So we got 20 dragon heads up here. Man, bet he wish he'd kept them alive now, at least to have some company. How are they surviving? What do they eat? Lice? I don't know. All right, he's just super depressed. We continue. I don't know why that made me laugh. Then he saw a flute hanging on the wall and said, "Why are you hanging there? This is no place for merrymaking." How do you know? Maybe the dragons were having a great time before you showed up and cut everyone's head off. Jesus. He looked at the dragon heads too and said, "You can't help me either." Hey, screw you, man. Like, don't mock dead dragons' heads that you cut off. I hate everyone in this story, except the daughters. They didn't really do anything wrong. He looked up at the dragon. Yeah, you can't help me either. He paced up and down the floor so much that he wore the ground down so that it became smooth. All right. At last, he had an idea. He took the flute from the wall and played a tune on it. Suddenly, many gnomes appeared, and with each note he played, another would emerge, and he kept on playing until the room was full of them. Then he asked them what he desired, and he said that he would like to return to the top of the earth again and see the light of day. Okay. So he's just asking them to help him again. Once again, he's not doing anything here. Completely separate. It's always like an old man that shows up randomly, or this is a random person that shows up and is like, "Hey, go do this and you'll succeed." That's bad storytelling. That's bad. All right. Then they each grabbed a strand of his hair and flew up to earth with him. When he was above, he went straight to the king's castle, where one of the princesses was to be married. So, oh my God, this is the most infuriating story. Why did they help him? Why did they show up at all? It's the gnome flute, okay? Sure, maybe. But then, why did they help him? He just beat up their brother, basically, or cousin, or whoever that was, and murdered all these dragons. Why did they help him? They showed up and he's like, hey, can you get me up there? And they're like, okay. What? Why? Motivation, guys. Motivation. There's no motivation here. Come on. Or context or backstory or opinions, anything. So lost. So lost here. And also, gnomes can't fly. And if they each grabbed a strand of hair and they're flying and they can fly, they can't all fit up a well. They would clog the well up. If one of them could like fly and carry them, maybe two, how many gnomes can fit in the circumference of a well? Not many, I'll bet. Unless he's like tiny gnomes, in which case it's super embarrassing that his brothers got beat up by one. But still, the logistics of this don't check out. That's too many gnomes to fit up a well, bro. Ugh, all right. So he went up above, went to the king's castle, where one of the princesses was to be married. Soon thereafter, he found the room in which the king was sitting with his 3 daughters. How? Is there no security here? How are you getting here, buddy? This is just some random guy walking into a castle straight into the room with the king and 3 princesses. This is like the entire royal family here. Dude just walks in. Come on, explain something. When the princesses saw him, they fainted. Okay, all 3 of them? Feels like they just don't want to answer questions about it. So like, oh, I'm fainting. Please don't ask me. Man, the king got very angry and immediately had him taken to prison. Yeah, that makes sense. He just broke into the castle. I get that. I totally get that. But also, like, on the way, wouldn't you explain yourself? Explain what's going on? He thought, yeah, okay, we continue. He thought the huntsman had harmed his daughters, but when the princesses regained consciousness, they pleaded a great deal with the king to release him. When the king asked them why, they said they were not allowed to tell him the reason. I hate when people are just like, oh, I can't tell you because I promised not to. It's not a good reason. Also, they're about to marry people that they know are murderers. That they don't have to. It would be so easy for them to get out of that. What? Girl, come on, princesses. What you doing? This is ridiculous. However, their father said they should tell it to the stove. Meanwhile, he left the room, listened at the door, and heard everything. Come on. Come on. This is the second story where someone has been like, okay, you have a promise that you can't tell something. You can't reveal a secret. Fine. Tell it to that inanimate object. Goodbye. And then they hide behind a door and over here. So, like, the conscience is clear of the person who made the promise not to tell. That is the stupidest nonsense I ever heard in my life. It's not on your conscience to tell a secret that you were only made to keep under, like, threat, under duress. Look out for yourself a little bit here. Don't marry a murderer because the murderer is threatening you, blackmailing you, even like it's, well, at least when every situation is different. I don't know. Don't, get killed or anything. But in this situation, they're the princesses. The instant they are back in the castle, these huntsmen have absolutely no power or authority or threat to hold over them. They could immediately just be like, seize them, they're murderers, and they murdered the guy who actually rescued us. The end. Now you don't have to marry murderers, and justice has been done. Instead, they kept the secret, refused to tell it when asked, And now we're doing this roundabout stove reveal when he could have just told him. And I respect them less for having not just stuck up for themselves and told the king. Right? Now I don't like them either. Man, the one characters I liked, lost respect for. Ugh. All right, well, he heard. Shortly after, he had the two older brothers hanged on the gallows and gave the youngest daughter to the young huntsman for his wife. Well, all right. This king is reacting swiftly. But yeah, they attempted murder. They didn't actually murder a guy, but they attempted and then lied about it to try to marry his daughters. Yeah, and you're a king. This is what's gonna happen to you. You're gonna get murdered. When the wedding took place, I was wearing a pair of glass shoes and stumbled over a stone. The stone said clink, and my slippers broke in two. The end. What? What is that? What are those last two sentences of this story? It should have ended just the youngest daughter and the young huntsman got married. Instead, we have the introduction of the narrator as a character for the first time in this entire story, saying, "Oh yeah, I was at the wedding and I wore a pair of glass shoes and I stumbled and the stone said clink and my slippers broke in two." What am I supposed to take from that? So, I mean, to be honest, it kind of explains why this story is so chaotic and nonsensical and we don't have reasons for anything, because it was told by an idiot who wore glass slippers to a wedding, and then obviously the slippers broke because they're made of glass. Buddy, come on, you idiot. This is ridiculous. This story is ridiculous. Again, I'm totally here for it. I love every single one of these stories, but man. Oh. That's the thing. There's so much. I know I said this is infuriating so many times because it's just there's all this random stuff happening that's kind of unexplained or unmotivated, but I enjoy it so much. Like the ride of it is so fun for me. I don't know why. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just a great time. This is a great time. All right, so I mean, is he gonna get rid of the tree now? So do something with that tree, buddy. At least lift the curse. Whew. That's and what's going on with these gnomes? There's these gnomes out here. And what's going on with the castle? Who lives in the castle? Whose castle is this? What? Why was there food there? I guess this wasn't the gnome's castle. I guess the gnome just does show up at that castle every day and attempt to beat up whoever gives him food. What is anyone doing in this story? This is ridiculous. This is chaos. Yeah, those are my main takeaways. It's like, don't protect something to the extent that it will actively harm the people you're trying to, not the people you're trying to protect, because he wasn't protecting his daughters at all. He didn't care at all about his daughters, just care about this one tree. But man, don't protect something so bad that it hurts people that you care about. That's a good lesson. Beyond that, I'm struggling for lessons. I'm struggling for takeaways beyond that one. I don't see a reason why he should have trusted the gnome and gone into the well. That seemed like a red flag. I also don't understand what this whole subterranean world is, because it's clearly not like a network or like a cave system of like Gnome World. It clearly wasn't Gnome World. It seemed to just be 3 rooms at the bottom of a well where 3 comatose dragons lived. And for some reason, that is where the three princesses ended up. Again, I don't know why, there could have been more. What happens if someone else eats an apple and then is also sent there? Are they now just like, all right, which room are you gonna hang out in and pick lice off this dragon? Who you want to hang out with and pick lice off this dragon with? So what is the deal with the lice on the dragon? Aren't lice more like in hair, right? Actually, I mean, in Chinese mythology, didn't dragons have like hair? There are dragons that have hair, I suppose. So I guess in this particular universe, these are hairy dragons, which are cool. I like those types of dragons too. Just different type of dragons, the bunch of heads. Oh, that makes me now. I like these dragons. It makes me sad these dragons are dead now. I don't like that they had to die for no reason. No reason. All of this would be better. Also, like, I don't like respect stupid Hans. I'm not like, oh, great. Stupid Hans got what he wanted. He didn't do anything either. He didn't show any he didn't show any cleverness because the gnome just told him what to do and the gnomes just like got him out of everything. He didn't show any generosity or kindness because like he just was like, nah, I'm not gonna pick it up. You pick it up, which is like, okay, fair, but like you're not a good dude. Like there's nothing that made me like him. No one did anything that made me like him. If anything, the daughters have the best like moral high ground or moral standing, I guess. But I don't respect them because they didn't say what was right and what really happened when they got back, even though they had no reason not to. And you'd be like, oh, they gave their word that they wouldn't. Nah, screw that. That's ridiculous. You don't owe promises to people who manipulate you. Man, there's a lot going on in this. I'm gonna do an adaptation here. I'm gonna have fun with it. I'm gonna get weird with this because this one's real weird. It's a real weird one, guys. This one gets real weird, and I'm here for it. Let's go. All right, we got an adaptation here. It's gonna be a series this time. I'm gonna tweak this one quite a bit. So we'll see how this goes. So we start with the CEO of a massive bank. He also runs their main branch, and he prides himself on the security of his bank. His bank is a fortress. You see, it's his precious gem. And this man is played by Ralph Fiennes, who's phenomenal in absolutely everything. And his bank manager has 3 daughters. And they will be played by Saoirse Ronan, Florence Pugh, and Maya Hawke. And Ralph Fiennes, he loves his daughters, but his whole identity is his bank, really. And he rules over this bank like a king. And he's very strict with his daughters as well. And they know not to mess with him and his bank. Now, these daughters, they're all like super intelligent and each have their own special skills. So Florence Pugh, she's the strategist. It's like the mastermind type. And Saoirse Ronan is basically like a spy or ninja. She's like a super spy. She can fight. She's super agile. She can pull off disguises and pretend to be different people and like manipulate people that way. She's very James Bond, basically. And Maya Hawke is the technical wizard who's great with computers and security systems and things like this. Just total tech whiz. And in fact, together, they have a security company and even helped their dad design his security system and make improvements there. What a happy family. And then one day, Florence Pugh gets an idea to rob their father's bank. And the other 2 sisters are skeptical. But Florence is like, he's always prioritized the bank over us. I don't want to spend my life just protecting money or possessions. And as security experts, that's all we do. Every day, sisters, let's take the money and disappear. Don't you want that life? With all our skills combined, we'll be able to vanish without a trace. And besides, I always just want to see if we can outmaneuver our own security system. Wouldn't you like to test yourselves against yourselves? And so the sisters, they ultimately agree. And sure enough, one day Ralph Fiennes comes into work to find that the bank has been robbed, clean out. Just a single silver dollar is left in the middle of the vault. So he calls the police. And since his daughters are security experts who helped him design the system, he calls them too, but none of them answer. And he keeps calling them, but nothing. He calls their friends, people who know them, their employees. Nobody can find them. And he realizes that he was robbed by his own daughters. So he calls all of his high-level banking and finance colleagues, and one of them gives him a phone number. And he calls the number, and a man picks up, and Ray Fiennes says, "I was told you know how to find people." And the voice on the other line says, "My brothers and I are the best investigators and bounty hunters in the world. But we don't come cheap." And Ray Fiennes says, "Money is no object. Find my daughters." And so the hunt is on. We've got 3 like badass brother detectives. They're not going to be like dumb idiots and mean people like in the folktale. They're going to be actually like cool. And brother detectives trying to track down and find these 3 super badass security experts turned thieves. And that's the show. Basically, the sisters, they've fled to different parts of the world, and the brothers, they find Maya Hawke in Spain, and they capture her, but before they can get her on a plane back to the U.S., Saoirse Ronan, she's in disguise, of course, she super spies her way in and escapes with her sister. They've disappeared again. So the entire show is just this cat and mouse all around the world. And of course, they kind of developed a respect and an admiration for each other, even though they're at odds. Maybe even a little romance between one of the brothers and one of the sisters. And so this show is basically, it's like Killing Eve meets Ocean's 11, which sounds awesome to me. We'll find other ways of getting like, there's got to be some sort of dragon connection. Maybe they form an alliance with like the triads or something, the Chinese mafia, and so that's sort of an analogy or an analog to the dragons that are harboring them in the folktale. Also, we've got to have like, they have to sort of befriend some like group or something. Here, I just came up with this now. I didn't even plan for this. So they they start like an orphanage, right? And but they also train these kids in like very valuable skills to make them like very, basically make them spies themselves, but also like super intelligent. And so then they kind of use, I don't know, morally speaking, if this is great, but they use these like kids to like help them out. And these are essentially, this is an analog for like the gnomes who show up and beat up the brothers a number of times. But I don't know how that is on a moral ground, but I really love the idea of like a bunch of like Oliver Twists, except they're super badass, showing up and beating up these brothers or just outmaneuvering them in some way at various places around the world. Yeah, I love that. I know this was a shorter adaptation, but it was a very long story. And yeah, you could see that go on for seasons and seasons and seasons. We've got the 3 brothers and the 3 sisters, so there's it's a big ensemble. Focus on different one of the brothers and sisters every season. We give them each an arc. Then we've got Ray Fiennes kind of in the background, like he loves his daughters, but he also kind of wants revenge, and he kind of wants to like, they stole from him and damaged his pride, his ego. They took from him one of the most important things to him, which was like his, security of his bank and the pride of no one will ever rob me. And they took that from him. But at the same time, they're like, shouldn't we be the most important thing to you? Your family, dad? There's a lot there. And I am here for it. So there we go. That is this week's episode of the ShadowBear Story Sessions, The Gnome. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you liked it. And yeah, tell someone about this. I don't promote. I'm terrible at all that stuff. I really like making this stuff. And if you like listening to it, then yeah, tell somebody about it. Subscribe. Do something. Just enjoy it, really. That's all there is. Just enjoy it. And tell other people about it. So yeah, come on back next time. And I will see you there.